Welcome to my channel, Hidden Points. Imagine for a moment that every argument you have ever had was not about who is right or wrong, but about invisible psychological patterns running just beneath the surface. These patterns shape your perception, your reactions, and the way your emotions flare up. They're older than society, older than culture, and older than any conscious choice you make. Today, we're going to explore the shadow dynamics that create conflict in relationships and how understanding them can transform tension into connection without force, without manipulation, and without control. The first truth is that a fight doesn't start in the moment, it ignites. It's triggered by unresolved emotional energy from the past. When two people enter a relationship, they bring unhealed childhood wounds, insecurities, unmet needs, and unconscious fears with them. Every small disagreement then becomes a spark for a much larger internal explosion. Most men believe avoiding arguments is about saying yes or just appeasing their partner. Most women believe it's about being heard and validated. But both of these strategies are superficial. The real conflict is psychological. It lives in the unconscious, thrives on projection, and feeds on fear. Let's go deeper. The man who can navigate these storms without fighting isn't avoiding the woman. He's mastering himself. This mastery begins with awareness of his own triggers, his own insecurities, and his own unspoken expectations. When a man understands that his irritation, frustration, or anger is a mirror of something happening inside him, he stops reacting automatically. This creates the first crack in the cycle of conflict. Most fights escalate because both people are mirroring each other's unresolved inner turmoil. One person reacts, the other reacts back, and suddenly, a small disagreement feels like a threat to your very identity and self-worth. Now, consider how projection works. Every one of us unconsciously projects our desires, fears, and frustrations onto others. In relationships, this becomes the silent engine of arguments. When a woman criticizes a man, she is often reflecting her own insecurities, unmet needs, or fears of abandonment. When a man reacts defensively, he is reflecting his own fear of inadequacy, rejection, or loss of control. Neither person is fully aware of this chain reaction. The fight is just a performance of unresolved internal conflicts, disguised as an external dispute. The next psychological layer is attachment style. We all carry different patterns based on our childhood experiences and early bonding. These patterns determine how we perceive and respond to conflict. A man with an anxious attachment style might panic when tension arises, while a woman with avoidant tendencies may withdraw completely. The combination of misaligned attachment styles creates a feedback loop of misunderstanding, where emotional needs constantly collide with defensive strategies. Imagine a relationship where both people are aware of these patterns. In this scenario, conflicts no longer require shouting or silent resentment because both partners can pause, self-reflect, and choose their responses rather than reacting automatically. The first practical layer of mastery is self-regulation. This requires you to develop the ability to feel an emotional surge without immediately acting on it. It means breathing through irritation, observing the sensations in your body, understanding the origin of the emotion, and remembering that every reaction is optional. Every pause is a choice. Let's explore the second layer, communication strategy. Avoiding a fight is not about staying silent. It's about speaking with clarity and presence. When a man communicates from a place of awareness rather than fear, he can express his boundaries, preferences, and needs without triggering defensiveness. When a woman senses this steadiness and clarity, she unconsciously relaxes because the threat of emotional volatility has been removed. The relationship becomes a space for dialogue, not a battlefield. Now, consider the role of validation. Many men misunderstand validation, believing it means agreeing with everything she says or giving constant approval. True validation is different. It's the recognition of her emotional experience without necessarily agreeing with the content. It's understanding her feelings and allowing them to exist without judgment. When a man masters this subtle skill, arguments lose their power because the emotional intensity is no longer being fed by denial or dismissal. Let's examine the third layer, shadow projection. This is the most advanced part. Everyone carries unacknowledged parts of their psyche, the shadow that surfaced during tension. Unresolved anger, jealousy, fear, and desire that have been repressed since childhood often emerge in disguised forms, like criticism, impatience, withdrawal, or sarcasm. The man who has integrated his shadow can observe these impulses without acting destructively. When both partners are shadow-aware, the unconscious pull toward fighting weakens because the energy is no longer secret and explosive. It's conscious and manageable. Think about emotional triggers in daily life. Most fights begin with small incidents: spilled coffee, a forgotten message, an unspoken expectation. When these moments are reframed as opportunities for awareness and reflection, rather than as personal attacks, the potential for an argument collapses naturally. The man who masters this skill recognizes these triggers and responds with calm, grounded observation. He allows space for emotions without absorbing them as threats to his identity. Now let's explore the fourth layer: boundary mastery. Conflict often arises when personal boundaries are unclear, violated, or ignored. A man who knows his limits and communicates them calmly and firmly removes the tension created by unspoken resentment. When he respects her boundaries equally, a mutual container of safety is created where both feel protected. The unconscious fear that fuels fights diminishes dramatically. Consider timing and energy. Most arguments happen when emotional or physical fatigue is high and patience is low. A man who observes his own energy state and chooses when to engage or when to pause prevents escalation before it even begins. The woman senses this rhythm and unconsciously mirrors it, creating a flow of cooperation rather than confrontation. Let's move to the fifth layer: anticipation and foresight. This is the art of predicting emotional responses based on your knowledge of her patterns, history, and attachment tendencies. The man who can anticipate without assuming blame or judgment can navigate difficult topics with precision and safety. This foresight drastically reduces the chances of conflict erupting in the first place. Finally, reflect on the role of empathy. The deepest reason some relationships are stuck in endless fights is a lack of emotional attunement. When both partners cultivate empathy and understand the unseen pressures inside the other person, the need to argue fades. Connection supersedes ego and reactivity. Imagine combining all these layers: self-regulation, communication, clarity, validation, shadow integration, boundary mastery, anticipation, and empathy. The result is a relationship where tension exists but doesn't explode, where disagreement is processed without defensiveness, and where mutual respect and psychological safety become the default state. Fights that once seemed inevitable are replaced with dialogue, observation, and emotional harmony. Here's the final psychological insight. Most men try to avoid fighting through avoidance, control, or submission. All of these fail over time because they don't address the root causes: the unconscious projections, the attachment misalignments, and the shadow dynamics. The man who truly masters relational conflict does so by mastering himself, by observing his own psyche, regulating his responses, integrating his shadows, and holding clear boundaries. He creates an environment where arguments lose their grip and connection deepens naturally. Women sense this maturity instinctively and feel drawn to trust, respect, and remain aligned with him. As we conclude this journey, remember that avoiding conflict is not a matter of tactics, manipulation, or clever phrasing. It is a profound psychological skill. It's self-mastery applied relationally. It's the awareness of all these hidden forces: projection, attachment, shadow impulses, and the delicate dance of communication, boundaries, energy, empathy, and anticipation. This is a skill that transforms tension into understanding and prevents fights before they even begin. It creates relationships that are steady, deep, and resilient and breakable, because both partners operate from consciousness and respect rather than from fear, reaction, or unresolved internal chaos. This is how a man can navigate conflict without arguments, and how psychological mastery dissolves the invisible triggers that make fights feel inevitable. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow for more insights.